and a few other riders to continue his career in the United States with Yoshimura Suzuki, then American Honda, and then, of course, our Canadian man made it big in the world stage with MotoGP, and we'll get into all that. But first of all, Yuji, welcome aboard Track Announcer's Notebook. How are you dealing with things down there in McKinney, Texas?
Thanks, Pat. Things are okay here. It's a bit quiet. It's a small town outside of Dallas. I'm out in the country, so it's nice. I don't get to deal with the city problems, and it's all right.
So your world came to a quick halt. You guys were over in Qatar for the opening round of MotoGP. You'd had a test at Sepang, where your rider, Cal Crutchlow, was second fastest. Then you had the Qatar test, and it was shortly after that things really all came apart in terms of how fast this coronavirus was spreading. You guys were dealing with the MotoGP situation. We were in Daytona, of course, for the Daytona 200. You eventually got there to help Pat Barnes, but likewise, that all got canceled. Take us through what you went through, starting with the events at Qatar, and then later on into March, where you're in Daytona, and that ended up getting canceled.
Well, we had a successful start of the season, always busy in the beginning of the year with getting the bike set up and trying out new stuff, brand new bikes, brand new engines and things. We had a successful test in Sepang. That was in the beginning of February. And then we moved on to Qatar to do our last test before the opening round of the GP. And just when things started to get pretty serious with the coronavirus pandemic, in Italy there was a big spread, widespread, and a lot of the people from the teams of the GP are from Italy. And during we had a 1 week off after the test to an opening round, and we all went home for that week. And then because of the pandemic, we weren't allowed back into the country without having a 14-day quarantine. So the whole GP got canceled, and then everything kind of slid downhill from there. One races and the next races got canceled, and some are postponed, but with no further concrete dates as to when we're going to play again. But we have some talks about restarting again. Obviously, over 20 races for the season, but most of them has been blocked out now. We'll see how much of it we can salvage, but there's been talks about racing in Jerez. Maybe there's some talks about double headers and things like that, but I think we're kind of waiting on the country's okay and permission to go ahead and have international traffic to go have this GP. So we're just kind of waiting for the next word.
Well, the round that was scheduled for April at the Circuit of the Americas, what's that, about a 2-hour drive from your home there in McKinney?
No, from my place it's about 4 hours actually. I'm north of Dallas, and and Austin is 4 hours away, due south. But it's a decent drive. Great circuit. I was looking forward to it every year, but didn't work out this year.
Well, it's been rescheduled, as I understand, to November 13, 14, 15. Rescheduled dates for some of the other rounds that have been missed. They haven't announced those, and as you said, they're waiting to get word as to when they can start back. Yesterday, NASCAR was able to restart their season at Darlington, albeit without fans, and I think for any of our racing events, whether it's MotoGP, whether it's CSVK, I think if those series, or even Moto America, they've announced they're going to start at Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin at the end of May, it's going to be without fans. Some series may be able to go ahead financially without fans, but I think others, it's going to be a real challenge. What is the situation as you know it with MotoGP? Can they go ahead and race without fans just for the television coverage and the sponsorship exposure?
I'm sure they've talked about it because I know they discuss a lot with the Formula One people as well, and they've already talked about things like that, running races with no spectators. Like you said, it's a really difficult decision to do because there's a lot of money invested and time and schedules and so forth, and so it's really hard to tell. Which way to go, run the race and have no spectators, and hopefully that everybody's going to watch it and everybody's still going to be involved in the activity, or shut the whole thing down and try to reset and come back as we always do with everything included. So it's really hard to tell. Well, what's the best decision to go with that? I'm sure the people at home are willing to see anything, I guess. For all of us that likes likes watching races, we would be happy to watch it on TV as well if we can't go. But as far as sponsorship and operational costs and things like that, I'm sure financially things are unbalanced, and this is it's a very, very difficult situation for circuit owners and the organizers all at the same time, with the sponsors involved in all the teams, and but the money invested is huge.
I can imagine. I saw on the weekend where a number of the MotoGP riders have been doing e-racing. I actually had an opportunity to announce a e-car racing event from Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. You'd probably still know it as Mosport. On the weekend, it was a little different. It's not the real deal, but I understand the Marquez brothers went 1-2, Alex beating Mark in the e-racing event they had on the weekend. So that's really the only thing that hardcore MotoGP fans can sort of hang on, other than following the news. I'm going to bring Michael Taylor here in a minute, but Yuji, tell us about your brief trip to Daytona. You've been there before with, I think, both Honda and Suzuki. You've been part of the Daytona 200 winning Matt Mladen efforts back in the early 2000s. But you went back this year to help out Pat Barnes, who we had on our very first show, and the disappointment. How disappointing was that for you, going there already you guys were practicing your pit stops, and then Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock they pulled the plug on the Daytona 200.
Right. Definitely disappointed about not being able to race. But I wasn't. It was a weekend that I was gonna leave for Thailand, and I wasn't. Normally, I wasn't able to get out there to go see that race. But because of the delay and cancellations, I was able to take a trip down and do a bit of racing with him. I haven't been racing with him for ages, over a decade. Haven't been to Daytona. I think I was calculating about 15 years. And so scene have changed a little bit, but it was really, really nice to be there. I wish that the race continued, but it's just a great feeling to be racing in Daytona. Like I said, it's been forever since the last time I went racing with Pat, and it's always fun time. It's really, really fun time. So for that part, I had a super great time. But as far as racing concerned, yeah, it didn't happen. So a little bit of disappointment. I wish I got to see him race and get some results, but he was doing all right. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, assuming the race goes ahead on October the 17th, I don't think you'll get a chance to be there because you'll be hopefully busy with MotoGP. Let's bring in the rider who you work with for most of your career here in Canada before moving to America and then to the world stage. Michael Taylor, it does say Jude, so Jude Taylor. Michael, how long has it been since you and Yuji got together on a phone call or on social media?
I don't think I've seen Yuji in years or so. I may have been on a phone call with him with Pat Barnes, because I get together with Pat every now and again. Pat's got a couple of car dealerships up in Goderich, Ontario, and I get out there whenever I get a chance, which isn't that often. I'm pretty darn busy with work and my kids still. But yeah, when Pat and I get together down in the city, when he has his meetings with the Humberview Group, which is part of his business, we sometimes will try to get on a group call with UG, or we did one with Owen Weichel not too many years ago when he was still with us. And yeah, Pat's pretty good at that. He's kind of a conduit for keeping everybody together and keeping everybody in the loop. And lately he's been trying to keep me even more in the loop than I have been. And that he's starting an endurance team to run some SOAR races out in Goderich there, and has asked me to get involved. So I'll be heading up to Goderich to join him and see what kind of fun's going on out at Grand Bend.
Michael, your official media release says you retired in 2016. Are you announcing here this evening another out of retirement? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I had a phone call with Pat last night because I was feeling guilty. I think it was over a couple of these in my neck of the woods that Pat talked me into the endurance program. And I'll be honest with you, I got mixed feelings. You know, I still got family that live. My kids both live with me, both of them, sons in university and daughters in high school, and I'm pretty focused on being healthy and able to, you know, keep a roof over their heads and stuff. So it's important for me to put everything in perspective. Yes, I loved racing, still love watching it, and this pandemic has given me the opportunity to watch more World Superbike events and MotoGPs from the 2000s and 80s and everything else than I would have really chosen to. But I have a desire still, but I got to be really careful. You know, I can't get hurt. I need to be, the last one I did at Mosport, I had a hard time containing my enthusiasm, and I rode the Triumph 675 there as fast as I could. And I guess part of it is, you age. I'm 54 years old now, and my ability to ride that thing the way I wanted to, or the way that my head tells me to, is limited. And Pat's got a program, I think, with a couple of Kawasaki 670s or 635s or whatever they are, and that's a pretty potent motorcycle. So I may get on the thing and ride for a few laps, and who knows, we may be talking about the oops, I did come out of retirement. But for right now, I'm still maintaining my retirement.
To be decided. Let's go to Stuart. Let's go to Stuart Nodell, because I think we may have a couple of questions for either Yuji Kikuchi about MotoGP, or maybe for Michael Taylor. Stuart?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Just in the Q&A section here, we've had Nathan Aslan, who's been following along with us. Unfortunately, he doesn't have his remote camera set up, or otherwise it'd be great to have him join alongside the panelists. But he just said it's great to see all the guys here. Yuji, Hall of Famer Mike Taylor, just gives everybody a thumbs up, and he's just glad he can join us each week to watch the show.
Well, of course, Nathan Aslan, very much a part of the Canadian motorcycle racing scene and the business side as well. Executive with Suzuki Canada, and then later Dealey Harley-Davidson. Nathan, good to have you aboard. And like everybody on this call, I think we're all itching and waiting for things to open up and we can get back to a racetrack someday soon. Let's go back to Yuji Kikuchi. Yuji, tell us a little bit about the rider that you've been working with for many, many years now, Cal Crutchlow. In preparing for tonight, I understand Cal was named after the great American rider Cal Rayborn, one of the top riders in the United States in the late 60s, early 70s, won a bunch of Daytona 200s. He's 34 years of age. Many think this might be his very last year in MotoGP. What has it been like working with a rider who certainly paid his dues coming up through the ranks in British Supersport and Superbike before getting the opportunity in MotoGP with a number of different teams? And of course, you've been working with him for, I think, almost 8 years now.
Yeah. Well, Cal, it's been a pleasure working with him. The man is full of energy. He's got this animalistic behavior, but he is all out, full throttle kind of guy. And but he's got a lot of experience with riding other bikes. And in the past, before he came to us at Honda, he's ridden on a Yamaha, he's ridden on a Ducati, and so he's got experience with other GP bikes. And he's great at testing and diagnosis. So we get a lot of information as to comparison and what one bike does over the other, and what is one more desirable type of feel that we want over another. So he has been very informative in that sense of setting the bike up. But yeah, he's tries real hard. He crashes a lot also, yeah, but in the end, it's great feeling to work with him, because you're assured he's 100% when he's out there racing. So it's been a great privilege and a pleasure to work with Cal.
So we've got Michael here, who was your real, first rider that you worked with. Cal is your current rider. What about the riders that you worked with in between Michael and Cal? Profile each one of those riders, what their strengths were as a motorcycle road racer. And you have worked with some greats over the years, including Nicky Hayden, of course, and some of the others, Pascal Picot.
Right. I've been fortunate. All the riders that I have got to work with they're great riders, and some of them are champions. And a couple riders that comes to mind with great energy is definitely Matt Mladen. He is 100% serious and committed about racing and winning. And he comes across quite hardball to many of the other people in the paddock. But bottom line, this man is just super, super serious about winning. And it's great to see a rider who's so dedicated and very serious about doing everything to win. And also Miguel Duhamel. I worked with Miguel for a number of years. Amazing talent. And it was so fun to work with Miguel. He's a super funny guy. And when the race starts, he's on it. He's 100%. And a lot of these riders that I got to work with, they certainly had the talent and the concentration to achieve results.
Yuji, one of the other riders that you worked with, not in America, but in MotoGP, was the late Nicky Hayden. And from my perspective, having announced a bunch of his races over the years and just seeing how he conducted himself, not only was he an amazingly talented and gifted rider, but he was just as equally a fine human being. And tragically, we lost him in that horrific road accident.
Yes, yeah. Nicky's an amazing rider. He's got talents, and what I really admired about Nicky was his efforts. He rides so hard, and he rides laps and laps to learn about stuff. And learning things on a GP bike, the feeling that you have at the beginning of the year is not going to be the feeling that you're going to have at the end of the year. We change a lot of parts, and we change things that will affect everything about the bike. So what you started at the beginning doesn't necessarily going to be the same one that you're going to have at the end of the year. So we need to constantly make efforts to make the current bike go fast. And his efforts in doing the laps and the tests to making things work was really good. He was amazing talents for that, and again, super nice guy to work with. He's so low key and just great family, just super nice guy. So it was a privilege for me to work with Mickey. And it's very, very unfortunate that, a guy like that had to pass away in an accident on his bicycle, in Italy, just up the road from Misano. But it goes to show you things could just happen that quick, and we need to appreciate all that we can do.
Michael Taylor, take us back to 1994 and 1996, your two Canadian Superbike Championship years. What do you recall vividly about those two championships? How were they different? How were they similar? And what was it like working with a gifted mechanic technician like Yuji? Because as they say, nobody stands at the top of the podium and receives the number one plate alone. There's a whole team helping him to get to the top of the podium.
Yeah, Yuji's one of the guys, and that when I think back on those years, there's a certain, my memory is being super confident on that front row, whether I had pole or didn't matter, wherever we are at the front, I could look over at Yuji and know that the bike had been prepared as well as it possibly could be. And it was part of the building blocks, that you get out there. And that's why people win. People win because they don't have a lot of question marks, and they have the strength of the convictions of their own abilities. And they have the conviction that the people that are working on the bikes have done everything they can. And a lot of it's communication. Front end feel is something that came to mind. You were talking about Matt Mladen, and I don't believe it was 94, 96. It was probably a couple of years after that I was still traveling down to do AMA Nationals in Superbike. I'd done some endurance racing early on, like before 94, like around 89 or 90, I started doing, the AMA had 2 or 3 hour endurance races as part of their series. And that kind of stuff, most of those I did on my own. I'd left, Yuji and Pat and some of the other guys, Brian and Jason, they'd stay back, and I'd go kind of do my own thing down in the States initially. And then I started bringing the guys down with the Superbike program. And one thing, when Yuji was talking about Mladen and his commitment, and I remember a race, I believe it was Phoenix, and I believe Yuji was working with Matt at that time. And I used to pay attention to Matt. I didn't really like him as a person, but I really respected his riding. And it was a race that he'd raced with Anthony Gobert. Gobert, I think, was on a Muzzy's bike, but he might have been on a Ducati, I'm not sure. And Mladen was with the Suzuki. And I remember going in and looking at the bikes after the race in Victory Lane, and the front tire on Mladen's bike looked like it was almost down to the cords on the sides. The center of it was still really good, but he rode that bike beyond what anybody was ever imagined to have been capable of, and just because he wanted to win that bad. And I looked up to that guy a lot for that sort of thing. And a side note too, I used to deal with Jim Allen at Dunlop. I guess Jim's retired a bunch of years now, like myself, but the front tire that Matt Mladen chose and for his setup, I got a takeoff once at a race, I had 10 laps on it or whatever they'd use for qualifying. And I was stunned by the feel I got. I can't remember the size. Maybe they were 16.5-inch front slicks, but I became addicted to that setup. I think maybe we had a similar sort of very stiffly sprung bikes at the front end, and the feel I got. And after that point, I took whatever takeoffs I could get. Now Dunlop wasn't generally in the practice, they didn't want to promote that sort of thing. They were in the business of selling tires, but a used takeoff for Matt Mladen is something that won several Canadian Superbike Nationals, believe it or not. I get my regular tires from Dunlop Canada for my qualifying and my practice and everything else. But we'd save one tire. Usually would always kind of put it in the truck with a label on it. Okay, save this one. This is the one that's going to win the race. And yeah. So as far as going back and remembering those seasons, I think 94 we were really focused without really knowing how good we were. And then 96, we came back. I had a lot of, setbacks, whether as Yuji recalled, I fell off a lot too. I tried a little too hard, and that set us back in winning championships. But 96, we put it all together, and we'd won a championship in 94. We knew what we were doing. The crew knew what they were doing. They knew what I liked in a bike. And it seemed a little easier, I guess, in 96 than it was in 94, because we had that, had a confidence, had a steam, and could put everything together.
Okay, Michael. Stuart, I think we may have a couple of questions from the folks tuning into Track Announcer's Notebook.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. We do actually. A bunch of people have chimed in here. So first, got a question, or more of a response for Mike from Corey, asking what Mike thinks of the current state of the Canadian National Series, and what could help to get people back into racing in Canada.
Good question. I haven't watched nearly as many races in the last couple of years as I wanted to. I get really busy in the summer. I got my own things going on now. I got a busy home life, but I got to a couple, and I did get to see Ben Young win his championship this year. I watched more races in 2019 than I had in the couple of years before that, and I got to say I was really impressed. He deserved his championship. He rode very, very well. I watched a couple of years before, like 2016, when I'd raced my last year on the Triumph at a few races, and Jordan really was above, head and shoulders above the other guys on the track. I felt like he could win when he wanted to. And a couple of races there, 2019, Ben had his number. He was real solid character. And as far as the series in general, it's wound down. We had a lot more top guys back in, I'm going to say late 90s, early, when we had Pascal, we had Kevin Lacombe, we had Crevier come back from the US, that Taylor guy, Lindley Clark, there were Ben Pilon, there lots and lots of guys. It was a thicker field of fast guys on good equipment. The industry was a little stronger then, so it allowed for that. But racing, listening to Yuji talk too about people are really eager to see something live, or see something that matters. I think we'd watch Miguel Duhamel race golf carts right now, which is probably what he's doing more than riding bikes. But it's an interesting time right now, because we are stuck behind our computer screens or our TV screens, and I have a feeling. Interesting little side note, but I'm renovating some stuff at Colin Fraser, who's been running the racing series here ever since I started racing in mid '80s. So Colin, Mr. Motorcycle Canada, has bought himself a new house, and he it's scary times for him and for a lot of the guys that have been preparing programs. But I got to think, the fact that we're not allowed to travel, I wanted to go down to Daytona and watch Yuji and Pat in that race, and I was going to drive down with my daughter, and like 2 days before we planned to go, we were told the border was going to close. So I'm itching to travel, whether it's racing or not. I think people are itching to see races. I got a feeling, even if we see one race in Canada, even if we see a Mosport in mid-September, I'll bet you it'll be one of the best attended races ever in Canadian racing, because people, this is the essence of motorcycle racing, car racing, and all sports, where we love the excitement. That it's interesting for the fans, it's interesting for the racers, and I think there's a real hole right now that needs to get filled by an event. So I know that I didn't watch the NASCAR race yesterday. It's not as interesting to me, but when things start to happen, I got to think that Canadian racing is got a future, and there will be a lot of people going to watch.
Thank you, Michael. Stuart, I think we may have another question or two.
Yeah, we've got some, I guess it's part of a question, also a comment from Chris Fair for Mike Taylor. He was, he always enjoyed, and when he started watching national racing, he's from out west in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and he remembers Mike having a lot of strong AMA Formula Extreme results, as do many of us. But one of his favorite memories of Mike was going around, I think it was the final round, if I remember correctly, at Shannonville with a broken exhaust bracket, trying to hold on to the title. And he was just sort of chiming in on that. And was really a comment for Mike. And then the other part, I guess, would be both for Mike and Yuji was, or Nathan Aslan has commented that he knew there were special tires now, and now he has the evidence. So maybe if there was some kind of protest from back in those days, I don't know. I think his expiration time has come and gone, but that was his comment.
I don't think it was illegal to have used tires from the U.S. in Canadian racing ever. So I stand by my championships. I don't think I got them illegally. And I spent the money, my own money, to go down there and put my crew up in hotels and everything else and race in the U.S. So I don't have a guilty conscience about it. But yeah, you're right, Nathan. There was some interesting things happening behind the scenes. But maybe there were with Suzuki too. You'll never tell us.
Stuart, have we got another question before we take a little bit of a break here and revisit some old motorcycle memories?
Sure. One other quick question here, and I think it's aimed toward Eugene. I don't know how much data or information he would have on a production bike, but we have a question regarding ignition timing on a CBR 1000 in a 2018 model. I don't know if that's in Eugene's wheelhouse.
I know nothing about it, man. I wish I could help you in that matter, but I have no idea about the CBR specs at this point in time.
Okay.
Well, if they've got a spare MotoGP Honda at home, I think you could be able to help them.
I could make a point. Too much overlap is a bad thing with valve timing and girlfriends.
Okay, words of wisdom from Michael Taylor. Stuart, if we've got those images we just want to share with everybody who is tuned in with us here on our Track Announcers Notebook Zoom tonight, and like to welcome aboard, I think he joined us late, John Bowes from Trinidad, so we've got a bit of an international audience. So my good friend John Walker with One Word, who's the official photographer at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park Mosport. He's got some amazing images, and we're each Monday night we're going to run a few of those. This is from one of the motorcycle road racer reunion Masters of Mosport things we did. Here are three of the greatest riders this country has ever produced. Of course, on the left, Rubin Mcmurray. I was watching a replay of the 1989 Superbike World Championship round where Rubin finished on the podium in both of those races, did Canada proud. In the middle there is Art Robbins, Art the Dart, a legend, but sadly I've been keeping in contact with his good friend Charlie Black, and Art is not in a good place. He's got some very serious health issues right now. We wish him the best. And of course, Michael Taylor, there's one of your longtime sponsors here. You ran their exhaust systems. Lang Hindle, and Lang and I go back a long time. Went to the old Loudon, New Hampshire, the Laconia Classic with Lang. A couple of other notes as well. The Laconia Classic was scheduled for June. They have moved that to the latter part of August as they try to reschedule. Now here's a classic Shannonville Motorsport Park / Nelson International Raceway. You see the crowd there. Spectators were a little bit different back then. That is Norm Murphy on the 87 on his Honda VFR 750, and right behind Ian McCallum on the number 86 Suzuki back in the heyday of racing at Shannonville Motorsport Park when they used to absolutely jam the place. This is, I believe, turn 2 at Mosport. Again, Murphy 87, leading 123, Rubin Mcmurray on the Eddie Lawson replica Kawasaki. Okay, we go to our next image courtesy of John Walker of One Word. And this is a bit of a classic, Yuji, maybe even before you were born. This is Miguel Duhamel on the factory Kawasaki and the 27, one of the Yamaha TZ750s. This is from the mid-70s. Skip Axland on the Yamaha TZ750. So we'll do that every Monday night. Pull up a few images and take a walk down motorcycle road racing memory lane. Michael, some of those images there, I think, may bring back some memories of some of your early years of racing when you were an amateur, and guys like Murphy and McMurray and those guys were racing expert and pro.
Yeah, interesting. But Murphy, I always had a guilt complex about Norm Murphy because he was riding Kawasaki's, and he was near the end of his career. And I'd watch, I'd started on Kawasaki racing at a competition wheels. Steve Grover was my my friend, my mentor, and he was a previous mechanic of Rubin Mcmurray's. So he told me all kinds of Rubin Mcmurray stories from the U.S. and and gave me a lot of career advice along the way because he'd seen things that he thought could be improved upon as far as getting my program together were. And Murphy, I wanted his job. He was a great guy. I liked his family, and he married into the Nelson clan. And John Nelson and I became really good friends. Now, interesting, but John Nelson and I never talked about racing, but we talked about dogs. He always loved my dogs at the racetrack, so we'd go up on a side thing. But he was invaluable to the birth and growth of racing in Canada, owning Shannonville Motorsport Park and then becoming manager of it later on in his career. So those pictures remind me of him and his hard work to maintain the place. But Norm Murphy and I, whenever I see him, I feel like, yeah, I'm here. I was always in for his job. So I felt a little bad about that. But, when your time comes, And I was really glad that that opportunity presented itself at Kawasaki once Norm stopped racing. So I had a lot of good years, 9 good years, many of them with Yuji Kikuchi, tuning for me and setting things up on the bike so that it worked and helped me win those things.
Yuji, before we came on at 7 o'clock, we were chatting just briefly about the lineage of great Canadian mechanics and technicians who were from this country and then went on to either the United States or the world stage, as you have. And I go all the way back to Bob Work, who was actually the mechanic for Yvon Duhamel when he won back-to-back international lightweight 250 races at Daytona on a 250 Yamaha back in 68 and 69. And then following that, the likes of Mike Crompton, who's a member of the Canadian Motorcycle Hall of Fame. Yuji, I know you're going to get in there one year. We just need somebody to nominate you. Maybe we'll work on that as a little project. And then, of course, you were part of the AMA Superbike scene when Rick Hobbs was making his mark there after working with Steve Crevier for so many years. So you've got to be proud about the history there of great Canadian mechanics and technicians carrying the Maple Leaf into international competition.
Absolutely. Started, small in Canada, doing racing in, at Shannonville and regional stuff to national stuff, and opportunity came for me to get on a bigger gig, and when I first moved to LA to work with Yoshimura. People were helping me out, and I come from Canada, so there's not too many Canadian guys in the AMA stuff or the GP. So I don't know. It's time to time I kind of look back and kind of remember how things started small for me and gone up as the years came and opportunities came, and so I feel very lucky. Rick Hobbs definitely helped me out when I first went down to LA. A fantastic man, fantastic, and Mike Crompton. Whenever I see him, it's a really cool experience to talk to him. So all my respect to all my the tuners in Canada are senior to me, and even Scott Miller he's also awesome, and I feel that I'm proud to be a Canadian that's out there still doing some racing out there in the GP.
Well, you've done this country proud, Yuji. Take us to a MotoGP weekend. Say, for instance, we're pretty sure that the race at COTA in Austin, Texas is going to happen in November. What is your weekend like in terms of what's going on earlier in the week? What happens when you get to the racetrack? And what are the hours like over the course of a MotoGP weekend for you?
Right. Okay. Concept is pretty much the same, I guess, compared to compared to Canadian racing. But of course, with the Grand Prix, typically we're traveling, internationally to get to circuits in another side, another country. So we arrive Tuesday night to start for Wednesday morning. Wednesday and Thursday is a setup and servicing the bikes. All the bikes that gets packed in the flight box is in a spec from the last race. So everything needs to be checked out and everything needs to be changed over to the new racing specs. And so Wednesday and Thursday will be maintenance days, and then Friday will be a practice, and then the Saturday will be qualifying, and then Sunday finally racing. My hours are, I guess it was as the same as it was in any time racing. You start pretty early in the morning, and if you have a successful day, it goes as scheduled. If you don't have such a great day, you crash a bike or you're running into setup problems and things like that. We're trying on a whole lot of stuff it could lead to late hours. But that's the same with all the racing we do around the world.
Profile your two riders that you are going to be working with once the season resumes. Are you doing any work at all for Cal Critchlow's riding teammate, Nakagami, who's going to be on his last year's bike?
Right. No, Taka, this year I won't be working on Taka's bike. A couple of years ago, I'm a gearbox specialist, so I do a lot of the transmissions and engine-related things. But a couple of years ago, I had both Cal and Taka to do the gearboxes, and that was a busy year. But they have their own guys. They brought in another Japanese staff from Japan to do their end of the work. So I will be just involved with Cal Critchlow's bikes, and Taka will be having the guy from Japan to work with him.
Well, Cal has been consistently in the top 10, but of course there's this guy by the name of Marquez, who has been pretty dominant the last number of years. And if that wasn't enough, he's brought his brother Alex, who dominated Moto2 last year. As we mentioned a little bit earlier, there were 1-2 in the e-sport racing event on the weekend. When you look at those riders, and they're both brilliant and very talented, what do you see, and what are sort of the goals for Cal and your team in terms of where you can finish in the World Championship in MotoGP?
Okay. First of all, I guess for the Marquez brothers, they are both incredible riders. Mark, obviously, he's this true talent and is a very, very smart rider. Alex has learned quite a bit. He's improved so much on the MotoGP now. So there's a huge gap from stepping up from Moto2 bike onto the MotoGP bike. Moto2 bike having, let's say, 20 different setups or something like that, where MotoGP would have 80 different setups. So variables and setups will you can sink or swim depending on whether you're gonna make the right choices or not. So he has been good at riding and getting used to it, and getting faster, getting used to the bike. So impressive for the first year and getting onto it, and he can ride on a factory bike at that pace. Is definitely has some talent, and so I guess we're all looking forward to how he's going to be doing this year with the bike. Can't say enough about Mark. Mark is solid, just super talented rider. He's kind of, Valentino Rossi was when he had his years of championship. He's just unbreakable and very solid. We'll see about the years coming. A lot of the bikes are catching up. Other than the competition is getting a lot faster and better bikes and stuff. So we'll see how it pans out for the other riders.
Yuji, that final test at Qatar before the season was put on hold, what did you learn about the new factory Honda bike, and how much more work have you got to do before that first round?
Well, the amount of work we got to do is kind of like endless. But I think initial impression about the 2020 Honda bikes is that it's all new. It was all new, and characteristically, it was a little bit different. Some good, some bad. At the point of the Qatar tests, I felt maybe we need a little bit more motor, but it's kind of hard to say. We still got a lot of adjustments with the fuel injections. We have our data guys looking at things and the burn characteristics and stuff like that. So I would have to say that it was premature in seeing the full potential of the bike at that time. But since then, because of this pandemic and there's no riding time, but the engineers of Japan has continued with developments. So I'm looking forward to what are the things that are going to be that's going to be available for us to try when we get back on track.
Are you doing Zoom calls like this with the mechanics back in Japan, or are you basically enjoying an extended vacation? Or are you working daily?
No Zoom call from Japan, and I'm thankful for that because the time difference is incredible. We do make sure we stay in touch with each other with emails and up-to-date information.
I got a question for Yuji, if I could step in.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yuji, you worked for me for a number of years. You've worked with Cal for a number of years, and a bunch of AMA guys in between. I'm just curious because rider controls aren't something it's just at the end of my career. That's when it was taking off. Traction control, ABS, and gyro and all of that other stuff. My question for you is not whether it's good or bad, but what would you estimate the ratio of rider input versus team input is nowadays versus 1996? What I mean is, do you trust what the rider gives you feedback? The rider says the front end's chattering. In 1996, nowadays the rider can tell you that, but you can also see it on your download from your computer. So, what do you think the rider aspect of that is these days? Can you just tell the rider to go sit down and you guys can figure it all out from your data recording information, or is it still as important as it was 25, 30 years ago?
I would say it is as important since it's the riders that's going to be doing the job in the end. So as let's say in the subject of chatter, let's say there's a different kind of chatters. So some chatters riders can put up with, some of them they cannot. And we see it and we try to get them to be more comfortable with it. That's so. In that aspect, I think things haven't changed since '96. It's just we got more tools to see things and verify that is indeed the problem that he's thinking that is having.
Yeah, I guess I wonder, like in days past, like 25 years ago, you'd obviously be on pit wall and you'd observe things, but it'd be I imagine it was a lot more on whether or not a rider could download to you what it was doing because you didn't have that data to go over, you know? So, but I don't know. I just wonder, has it made it easier, or it's still because the level has got it, like you know, if a rider's got a good setup nowadays and really good communication with his team, with you and everybody else that's tuning the bike, obviously that's success. But would you say that the rider is needed less now for that feedback, or the same?
I would say same or more. And
Okay.
I'll tell you why about more. Because we got more things to adjust electronically,
Ah,
and parts. Also, there's more things to adjust for, let's say, fuel injection, or let's say little variables you find in the suspension settings, things like that. That there are more to choose, more choices, more opinions on it, which means more things to look after, but you only have so many sessions.
mm-hmm.
So bottom line, you got to make the right choice and try not to waste time by going backwards.
Yeah. Thank you.
So yeah, data will give us stuff, but definitely rider's opinion and communication is key.
Stuart, I think we may have another question or comment or two.
Yeah, we've got a couple here. Well, just a question I think being asked to you, Chief, from Corey is, what do you think's the health of the job market is for motorcycle racing mechanics or technicians? Is it becoming more increasingly difficult? Are teams scaling back, or are there opportunities for people to come along, such as yourself?
I see. Okay. I get asked about this quite a bit, but I think in general, I think motorsport, in motorcycle, let's say, is steady or getting a little bit better. The only difficult part, which I cannot answer the complete, of this question, is that the financial backing of some of these series have, gone different. Some had lost some finances, the money into the sport, and I see that, and that makes it difficult for people to continue racing. So, and that kind of leads to the whole series in a championship with future, and in that sense, no one can say for sure the future for the mechanics to go racing are secure. But on the same token, when you see the popularity of the sport, let's say, for me, for MotoGP, at a given, good weekend at the GP, when you see the people coming, when you see the energy, I could only see as this is just going to get better and bigger. So therefore, the potential to get this type of work definitely will open up.
Awesome. Well, thanks. That's really insightful. We just had one other comment, Pat, from Jim Brown, and I believe he builds Jeff Williams' BMW Superbike, and he's just commented that he's looking forward to hopefully getting it on the track and at least racing once this year. And a lot of us remember Jeff from back in the mid '90s, kind of when I came along. I came along with Jeff, so I know Mike would know Jeff well. Certainly, they raced and shared the racetrack numerous times.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Stuart, I understand with the Daytona 200 being postponed until October the 17th, that there was some rumor that Jeff Williams was going to enter that event to join another road racing veteran in Pat Barnes, of course. Darren James is committed, as well as Alex Coelho from Quebec. So we may have not 3, but more Canadians. And just a quick update on that, when I checked with Kevin Elliott with ASRA and CCS, is on June the 1st, and we'll try to get him on that show, that they are going to open back up entries for the Daytona 200. So that I believe there were 78 pre-entries, and they're going to open things up. And with the racing season not starting, even in the United States, they still haven't started. They might get going at the end of May at Road America, but I think there's going to be lots of equipment, lots of riders with still budget left, and I think we could see close to 100 entries for the Daytona 200. So if Jeff, in fact, is going to post that entry, then we're looking at least 4 Canadians for the Daytona 200. Any final questions, Stuart, before we wrap it up here with Eugene and Michael? Can't hear you, Stuart.
Sorry, I think Pat Barnes has some comments here, but we'll skip those comments for now. The guys know Pat well, so we'll have to have a private session and they can chat with Pat.
That's after the show. Barnes, go and sell some cars.
We'll call it After Dark or whatever, right, with Pat Barnes.
So, Eugene, first of all, I wanna thank you. One of the other great Canadian technicians, mechanics, I didn't mention when I was running through that list, of course, is Jonathan Cornwall, and he has been part of the scene. I think I knew he was doing World Superbike. He was doing AMA, and did he ever get over to MotoGP? Did you ever cross paths with him over there?
No, I didn't see John at GP, but he's pretty famous. Everybody knows him around the world. But he was Carl Fogarty's suspension guy, and he did enough years of World Superbike and top stage, so he's super talented. And I got to meet him in Daytona, so that was nice. I just didn't get to catch up so much with him, but I got to see him.
Okay, Eugene, your final thoughts on the guy that you sort of learned the tricks of the trade with, working for him all those years, Michael Taylor.
Mike. Mike.
Hi.
Awesome.
Thank you.
No, it's been many years, but it's been really cool experience to do those years of working with you, and it was a lot of fun. That's a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah.
But
especially ups and downs, and you got to learn how to fix fiberglass pretty good.
Michael, your final thoughts on the guy who was there with you for those 2 Superbike championships?
Well, mainly I'm super proud. It's nice to know that that maybe some things that happened in our pit and at the racetracks we went to inspired Eugene to be bigger than just working for Michael Taylor in Canada. And it was awesome to see him do well in the US, with a lot of the guys that I raced against, never anywhere near Matt Mladen, but I had some really good races with Nicky before Eugene worked with him and stuff. And I was always super proud of Eugene every step that he made. And I watched Cal Crutchlow. He's always the guy that I watch the most when I watch MotoGP. And I wish you guys the best, and hopefully you guys can get something out of this season, because guys like me that are hammering nails and doing things like that Monday to Friday are pretty eager to see the guys do it proper. Watch Cal ride the way that I'd be riding if I could, because he's got you working for him. So best of luck to you, and thanks very much for all your help.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks,
we're going to send it to Stuart to see if we've got one final question, and then we're going to wrap it up and say so long to Eugene and to Michael. Stuart?
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, I just want to, again, thank the guys, both Eugene and Mike, guys that I've been fortunate to get to know a little bit, and they're great guys, so I like to consider them a friend. So I'm also thankful they came on with us this evening. And then just a couple of comments here in the Q&A section is Jim Brown did confirm that Jeff Williams has said they're going to Daytona, so you can
perfect.
That's
Stuart,
going to happen.
Stuart, we always, and this is for a few years, we had our annual Canadian-American Daytona dinner on the Wednesday night. Barnes was there, Alex Coelho was there, and we're going to do another one, assuming they open the border and we can all get to Daytona in October. So we'll have to extend that that invitation to Mr. Brown and Mr. Williams.
That's awesome. And then the only other thing, Nathan Aslan just commented that it was a privilege for him to be a part of Mike's Hall of Fame induction.
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and we were there as well, Michael. Welcome to the club. And Yuji, you're, as they say, a shoo-in to get into the Hall of Fame. I think we're gonna start the nomination tomorrow. Well done. Thanks for coming on, and hopefully you guys are racing sooner than later in MotoGP. And Michael Taylor, great that we're able to reunite you here on our Zoom track announcer's notebook with the guy who was right there with you for those championships.
Yeah, and thanks, Pat. And I got a closing comment that I told my kids before. They were too young to know Yuji in those years, but I said, Yuji Kikuchi knows very much, says very little. Best guy to have around.
Okay, Michael and Yuji, thanks again for being part of this evening's track announcers.
Thanks for the honor. It was an honor, Pat. Thanks.
Great. And
yeah, thank you
Michael,
very
we
much.
had Jordan
Honor.
on last week. There was a great shot of you, Jordan, and Don Monroe. And we said, hey, can you believe it? There are 17 Canadian Superbike championships in that picture. So in maybe the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to get you back on with Don Monroe and with Jordan Zoke to have a bit of a Kawasaki factory reunion here on the show. Maybe the day that we get Andrew Knowles on here. We're trying to get him, but with the time change in Osaka, we haven't been able to get him on. But we'll have you back on a little bit later on. Yuji, be well. All the best to you and your family. And Stuart, we'll send it back to you for one final note, and then we'll wrap it up here tonight.
Okay, thanks, guys. If anybody has any comments or any content they'd like us to put on some of the upcoming shows, just put a comment in the Q&A section. Then Pat and I can organize that for the upcoming shows over the next few weeks.
Okay, great. Stuart, like to thank once again Michael Taylor, Yuji Kikuchi. Like to thank John Walker with one word for providing some of those classic images. We'll have a bunch more next week. And to my co-host, Stuart Nodell. Stuart, get out there and sell some homes this week. All right. And we'd like to thank everybody who joined us here this evening. Spread the word. We'll see you next Monday night, the 25th of May at 7 p.m. Eastern for another edition